The music was upbeat, the lights warm and expensive, and everyone pretended to enjoy the wine more than they actually did. It was the annual company party, Cole's company, to be specific, and I knew exactly what kind of performance was expected. Not too flashy, not too quiet, just agreeable, presentable. The kind of wife who made a good impression without leaving one too strong. I'd spent over an hour deciding on my outfit. Something classic, not desperate. Navy blue sheath dress, modest neckline, minimal jewelry. I didn't want to look like I was trying to compete with the junior execs in cocktail dresses, or worse, like I was trying to blend in with the wallpaper. Cole, as usual, was in his element, shaking hands, laughing in that particular way that sounded natural only after 3 drinks. He moved easily among his colleagues, CEOs, and department heads like someone raised for this. I stood by the bar, sipping something dry, offering polite nods and smiles when anyone made eye contact. No one lingered. And then she arrived. Avery, my sister-in-law. Blonde bob, sharp red lipstick, a power suit that probably cost more than my car payment. She moved like she owned the room. She often did. Avery was Cole's sister, but more than that, she was HR royalty, smart, calculating, and always 2 moves ahead. "Lovely dress," she said, sidling up next to me, her voice soft but tinged with that familiar blade. "You always dress like someone who wants to be noticed, but doesn't want to admit it." She smiled. That perfect clipped smile that said more than it looked like. I returned it, just as fake. "And you always manage to sound supportive while making sure I know you're not." Her smile twitched, just enough for me to notice. I should have walked away. Later that evening, the conversation shifted near the patio. Someone made a snide remark about the company's new diversity initiative, something along the lines of hiring quotas making it impossible to prioritize talent. I wasn't even tipsy. I just spoke. "Maybe if we hired more competent women instead of promoting based on who's related to who," I said, calmly, directly. "Maybe things would actually change." I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. But I didn't realize Avery was right behind me. Her face didn't change. Not then. But her eyes locked onto mine for half a second, like someone marking a target. And then she walked away. That was the moment. I felt it, like the oxygen shifted around me. Later, I would learn that one sentence, that one throwaway comment, was used to open a formal case. Twisted, rewritten, positioned as an attack on the company, on the family. But in that moment, I only felt it as a tremor. A quiet warning in the pit of my stomach. Avery returned a few minutes later, holding a glass of white wine like it was part of her costume. "You okay?" she asked, all sugary concern. I nodded slowly. "Sure, why?" "No reason, it's just, maybe step outside, get a little fresh air?" I hesitated. She was never this polite. That was my first real warning. Still, I followed her outside. The patio was quiet. Cooler air. Less music. Just us. She leaned in close, lowered her voice. "Some things are better left unsaid," she said, still smiling. "Especially when you're married into the company." My stomach clenched. "What do you mean by that?" She sipped her wine, then looked me straight in the eyes. "I mean, just be careful, sweetie." And then she turned and walked away. She didn't wait for a reply, didn't even glance back. The word careful repeated in my head the rest of the night like static. I wasn't sure if it was a warning, a threat, or both. Cole didn't say much on the ride home. He stared out the window, jaw tight. I asked if Avery said anything to him. "She just mentioned you seemed a little tense tonight," he said, eyes still forward. I prodded. He shut it down. Classic Cole. Neutral until neutrality hurt more than taking a side. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, her voice echoing in my mind. "Just be careful." Like she knew what was coming. The next morning, Cole was gone before I woke up. No kiss, no note, just gone. And then it came. A calendar invite. Subject, HR check-in. Mandatory. No message. No context. I clicked on the sender. It was the official HR account. Cold, anonymous. But I didn't need to ask who was behind it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that subject line like it might blink first. My coffee had gone cold. The silence in the house felt heavy, loaded. That's when it all began. The war you don't see. The one fought with emails, implications, and silence that cuts deeper than shouting ever could. And I walked into that HR meeting not knowing that the CEO himself would be joining. Monday morning felt colder than it should have, even for a Texas fall. I arrived 5 minutes early, the way I always did, still unsure what HR check-in mandatory really meant. The receptionist at the front didn't smile, just tilted her head toward a conference room down the hall. I walked slowly, heels tapping against the floor, heart kicking against my chest like it knew something I didn't. When I pushed the door open, I expected a clipboard and a friendly HR rep with vague reminders about policy. Instead, I froze. There, at the end of the table, sat Margaret Ellis, the CEO. Her presence alone changed the air in the room. To her right was Avery, my sister-in-law, staring hard at the folder in front of her like it owed her something. And across from them, a man I didn't recognize, legal counsel, most likely, flipping through paperwork without even acknowledging me. No one said good morning, no offer to sit, no introductions. I pulled out the nearest chair and sat anyway. Margaret glanced up. Let's begin. No small talk, no easing in, just a curtain rising on a play I hadn't auditioned for. The HR manager, Linda, whom I'd only met once, slid a thick folder across the table. Its label read, Internal Conduct Concerns. Inside, the first page listed statements I supposedly made, none of which sounded like me. A quote attributed to me said, I don't trust anyone who got their job through family. Another claimed I'd intimidated junior staff during meetings. There were screenshots from Slack, taken out of context, messages I vaguely remembered, jokes, sarcasm, nothing inflammatory in real time. This document includes reports collected over the past 3 months, Linda said, without emotion. 3 months? Avery finally spoke. We're here today to address patterns of inappropriate communication. Some staff have expressed discomfort working with you. I looked at her. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. This isn't about that comment at the party, is it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She smiled, tight and practiced. This isn't a single incident conversation. So it had been building. Quietly. Carefully. While I thought I was simply navigating family dynamics, someone, probably Avery, had been stacking matches. Margaret's voice cut through the tension. Do you feel this environment has become toxic toward you? It was the last question I expected. Her tone was unreadable, the kind that didn't reveal intent. I met her gaze and chose my words carefully. I think loyalty is sometimes mistaken for silence. A pause. She nodded once. Not approval, not disapproval, just acknowledgement. But Avery shifted uncomfortably. That wasn't the reaction she wanted. She was expecting me to spiral, to cry or protest. Instead, I folded the folder shut and looked directly at her. I'll respond to each of these claims in writing, I said evenly. Linda nodded. You'll have 3 business days. Avery's expression twisted, just slightly, as if I'd just ruined a moment she'd planned for weeks. I stood slowly, hands resting on the folder. And I assume transparency applies to both sides. No one replied. But Margaret's eyes lingered on me, just long enough to make me wonder what side of the table she really sat on. Back in my car, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the engine idle, staring at the building like it might give me answers. This wasn't just workplace politics anymore. It was personal, carefully coordinated. And yet, something about the CEO's quiet neutrality nagged at me, like she hadn't made up her mind, like she was waiting. That afternoon, I went home early. Cole was already there, sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee he didn't offer to share. How'd it go? He asked, eyes not meeting mine. Like a deposition without a lawyer, I said dryly. He didn't ask more. He looked tired, not from the day, but from what it meant to be stuck between 2 women, his sister and his wife. I didn't envy him, but I also didn't sympathize. I walked past him, up the stairs, into our bedroom. I opened the bottom drawer of my jewelry cabinet, turned the lock with a small silver key, and pulled out the flash drive I hadn't touched in over a year. It was from a company retreat, a night when Avery drank too much and spoke too freely. I had recorded the audio at the time, mostly out of habit. She'd said things about hiring practices, about manipulating reports. At the time, it felt like gossip. Now, it felt like insurance. I hadn't planned to use it, but planning wasn't enough anymore. That night, while brushing my teeth, a notification buzzed on my phone. Unknown number. Just one line. "You don't know me, but I know what Avery's doing. We should talk." It was past midnight when my phone lit up. I was still wide awake, laptop closed, but thoughts racing. The name on the screen made me sit up straight. Maya Patel. I hadn't heard from her since she left the company 2 years ago. Her message was simple, but it made the hairs on my arms rise. "You probably don't remember this, but I think you need to see something." Maya had always been sharp, quiet, the kind of person who didn't speak unless she had something worth saying. She left the company after what everyone called a mutual decision. I never bought it. Attached to the message was a voice memo. I stared at it for a long minute before tapping play. It took me back to that weekend retreat in Dallas. I remembered the fireplace, the forced team-building exercises, the open bar. It had felt harmless at the time, almost fun. But then Avery's voice came through, a little slurred, a little smug. "Some people think being married to my brother makes them untouchable." "That's cute." I froze. That line, I remembered it. At the time, I thought she was just venting, being petty. I had no idea she was laying the groundwork for something much colder. I pressed play again. This time I listened to the tone. It wasn't just drunk sarcasm. It was resentment wrapped in entitlement, the kind that festers. The memo ended, but Maya's message didn't. "I didn't know if I should say anything before, but she's dangerous. Be careful." 2 years ago. That's when it started. Back then, I'd brushed off Avery's snide comments, the way she redirected credit, the subtle digs at meetings. I thought she was just territorial, maybe even insecure. But now I saw the full picture. This wasn't spur-of-the-moment retaliation. It was premeditated. She'd been positioning me for a fall ever since I became family. I started pacing, emails I never received, meetings that mysteriously excluded me. Reports that went missing and then magically turned up after decisions were made. It wasn't just Avery being petty, it was a campaign. She'd been crafting a narrative about me. And I'd been too focused on staying professional, keeping peace, not stirring up drama in a family business. I sat down, opened my laptop again, and started organizing. Emails, calendar invites, Slack threads. I opened a spreadsheet and began building a timeline, connecting people, dates, comments. This time, I wouldn't be caught off guard. Around 2:00 a.m., my phone rang. It was Maya. "I'm sorry for texting so late," she said quickly. "But if you're going to use that audio, be ready. Avery plays dirty." She didn't sound afraid. She sounded like someone who'd been burned. She fabricated performance reviews on me, said I isolated myself from the team. That's how she got me out. "She doesn't just want to win," Maya added. "She wants to erase you." "Like you were never there." That line stayed with me. "She wants to erase you." I thanked her, promised to be careful. But in my gut, I knew this wasn't going to stay quiet much longer. Whatever came next, it would be louder, public. I hung up and turned off the lights in the living room. Cole was asleep upstairs. I didn't want to wake him. Not yet. Back in our bedroom, I sat on the floor with my laptop in my lap, light from the screen the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. I created a folder, counter strategy. I dropped the voice memo in, then screenshots, timeline notes, a list of people who'd been in key meetings, who saw what, who'd heard what. Then I drafted an email. Not to Avery, not to HR, to Margaret Ellis. I didn't send it, but just writing it made something in me settle. This wasn't about revenge. This was about telling the truth, before someone else told their version loud enough to drown mine out. At 5:30 a.m., the sky outside started turning a pale gray. I stood up, stretched, closed the laptop, and for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to walk into that office. Monday morning started like any other. I walked into my office, coffee in one hand, folder tucked under my arm, still running through edits on the Asia expansion deck in my head. Then my phone rang. Not my cell, my desk line. That phone rarely rang. It was Avery's assistant. The CEO wants to see you downstairs. Now. No other context. Just that. I stood up slowly, already sensing the shift in the air. In the hallway, two junior associates looked away too quickly. One whispered, "She's being pulled in to present." I didn't panic. I adjusted my blazer, straightened my posture, and walked. The boardroom door was already open when I arrived. Margaret Vale, the CEO, sat at the head of the table. Avery was beside her, cool as glass. Legal stood silently in the corner. Not a welcome, not a seat offered, just a nod. I stepped inside. Avery began her presentation as if she'd been rehearsing it for weeks. Today we'll outline the regulatory implications and partnership logistics for the Asia Expansion Initiative, she said. My own bullet points flashed on the screen. Same structure, same language, even the graphs I'd stayed up perfecting. Except this time, they had her name on them. Project Lead, Avery Granger. I scanned the room. Confused glances, polite nods, but no pushback. I cleared my throat. Actually, I compiled most of the regulatory risk projections. Avery didn't miss a beat. Thank you, she cut in, without turning. We all collaborated at different levels. Collaborated. That word stuck like ash in my mouth. Margaret didn't say a word. Her gaze never left me, unreadable. The presentation continued. My voice memos had been transcribed, polished, and repackaged, but my name? Scrubbed clean. Afterward, I walked back to my office with no memory of how I got there. My legs moved, but everything else felt locked. At my desk, I stared at the folder still in my hand, the same charts she'd just presented, except mine had notes, citations, sources. This wasn't just about disrespect, it was theft. Theft of time, of credibility. And the worst part? It wasn't sudden. It had been coming. I saw now how many times I'd let her cut in, how often I smiled through it thinking, just let it go. But not this time. I opened my email and typed a message to Margaret and the legal team. No accusations, just questions. Who was listed as contributor? Who had rights to what content? Who had authority to represent findings publicly? Then I drafted bullet points of every piece I touched. Regulatory research, compliance drafts, vendor due diligence. I pulled receipts, dates, source emails. Next, I called Clive. If there was one person who knew the bones of this project, it was him. He didn't hesitate. Yeah, I saw what she did. And I'll back you if you need someone. That meant more than I could say out loud. I didn't send the email yet. I saved it as a draft. I needed to be precise. I needed to be undeniable. Clive showed up an hour later with a manila folder under his arm. Thought you'd want these. Inside were old emails, Avery praising my early findings, even asking for my review on the initial framework, and footnotes. My name, deep in the metadata of her shiny new slides. He didn't linger, just said, "You deserve credit for this," then walked out. I sat there for a moment, letting that sink in. Deserve. A word I hadn't let myself believe in for a while. Then a ping. Slack. Noreen. I know what they did today. Don't let them erase you. You're not invisible. I stared at the screen, then reached into my drawer. My father's pocket watch. I ran my fingers over the face like I used to as a girl. He'd always say, "Time doesn't wait for silence." That stuck with me. I pulled up my original deck, cleaned it up, added my findings, adjusted the framing, labeled every source, labeled my name. I wasn't going to beg for a seat. I was going to build my own table. By late morning, the energy on the office floor had shifted again. I felt it before I saw it, like stale air in a room that once held warmth. I walked past a pod of desks, and 3 heads dipped simultaneously. Screens flipped from chat to spreadsheets. No one said good morning, This wasn't anxiety. It was coordination. Not new either. It followed a pattern. I'd seen it before in smaller ways. Before HR sent that mysterious calendar invite. Before my name disappeared from my own deck. Now it was ramping up. I climbed up to the rooftop cafe for a break. Not to eat, just to breathe. Up there I could think. Watch the office from above, get my bearings. Through the glass, down below, I spotted her. Avery. Laughing loud with the same team she once said had limited strategic depth. She knew what she was doing, turning people into pawns. I sent her a message. 5 minutes. Rooftop. She replied with a thumbs up. She showed up smug, sunglasses on, holding some overpriced smoothie like it was a badge. Walked over slowly, like I'd called her up for advice. I don't have long, she said. Neither do I replied. So, I'll be direct. She blinked. You can have the presentation, I said. Hell, take the credit if that's what keeps you up at night. But you don't get to rewrite my record, not while I'm breathing. Avery didn't flinch. She smirked. You're overthinking all this. You always have. Don't gaslight me, Avery, I said, low and flat. This isn't about emotion. This is about manipulation. She shrugged. So what? You're threatening me now? I met her eyes. If you make one more move to discredit me, I'll open everything I've got. Everything. That wiped the grin off her face. Just for a second. She recovered, tried for sarcasm. That's not very professional of you. And you're not very good at hiding who you are. I let the silence sit. I won't be your shadow anymore, I said. She didn't respond. She just turned, walked away with a stiffness in her spine that gave her away. I didn't watch her leave. I stared past the buildings, into the space where silence used to keep me safe. Back at my desk, I barely had time to sit before Paul, one of the HR associates I trusted, swung by casually. She's trying to file something, he whispered, preemptively. What now? I asked. He glanced around, lowered his voice more. She's saying you're escalating, creating tension, playing reactive. Of course, that was the game. Push me to the edge, then claim I jumped. Thanks for the heads up, I said. Paul nodded once, then walked off like we never spoke. I opened my personal log, updated the date, time, and Paul's quiet warning. Labeled it, intent to provoke. Then I composed a neutral email to HR, requesting a clarification meeting. Roles, responsibilities, project boundaries. I added my updated contributions. At screenshots. Client praise from last quarter. No opinions, just facts. And I blind copied a legal contact I'd spoken with briefly last fall, just in case. I printed 2 hard copies, sealed them in a manila envelope, and filed it in my locked drawer at home that night. This wasn't fear. This was caution sharpened by repetition. She's not stronger, I said aloud to myself in the mirror. Just more practiced at being unchecked. This time she wouldn't be. Later that evening, I made dinner. Just pasta, nothing fancy. Cole leaned against the counter watching me. You're quiet, he said. I didn't look up. Your sister crossed a line. Again. He exhaled long through his nose. What do you want to do? I'm already doing it, I said. But I want you to know, she won't stop unless I stop her. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. Do what you need to do. Just be smart about it. Smart. I thought about that word for a long time after he went upstairs. Being smart didn't mean staying small. It didn't mean silence or playing along while your name got erased one stroke at a time. Smart meant strategic, honest, loud when it counted. I pulled out the flash drive from my drawer, slipped it into my work bag. I didn't plan to use it, but I needed it near. Tomorrow wasn't just another work day. It would be the day I started speaking for myself. On my terms. I stared at the email for a long minute before even touching my mouse. Subject line was cold, clinical. Formal concern filed regarding employee behavior. I knew what it was before opening it, but I opened it anyway. Inside, a PDF attachment, complete with HR headers, Avery's name, and bold accusations. Apparently, I had yelled in the hallway, slapped my hand against a door, caused distress. They even used the phrase, emotionally destabilizing to colleagues. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because none of it happened, not even close. This wasn't a stretch of the truth. It was a full rewrite. She wasn't trying to paint me as difficult anymore. She wanted me labeled unstable, a threat, the kind of label that gets whispered, then locked in a file you never get to read. This was her last card. She thought she'd finish it clean, but I wasn't walking away. I reopened my private log, the one I'd been keeping since the first hint of trouble. Timestamps. Slack exports, project tracker comparisons, voice memos, emails, Paul's message from earlier, the warning about Avery's moves. I typed that up word for word, timestamped it, logged it. I added the printout from a call with a compliance consultant I'd brought in for the Asia project, one Avery had completely omitted in her version of the deck. I highlighted discrepancies in her HR report and wrote a formal response. Calm, dry, laced with evidence, no adjectives, just what happened. Then I did what I hadn't done before. I requested an official internal mediation. I named the concern, patterned workplace defamation and misattribution of professional credit. And this time, I CC'd Margaret, not to show teeth, just to make it clear. I was done whispering. Thursday morning arrived colder than usual. I didn't dress like a warrior, just neat. Gray blouse, no jewelry, flats. It wasn't a performance. The HR mediation room sat at the end of the glass corridor, its walls clear like confessionals. Avery was already there, perfectly poised, flipping through something on her phone like this was just another check-in. She looked up and offered a sugar-sweet smile. I didn't return it. The HR lead today wasn't one of her allies. New face, clean eyes. I took my seat. Avery started with her routine, concern cloaked in care. I just feel the working relationship has shifted, she said softly. It's no longer collaborative. The HR rep nodded, turned to me. I didn't speak right away. I laid out my file, slid it forward. I'd like to walk us through the timeline of events, I said. I didn't look at Avery while I spoke. I focused on the facts. I pointed to contradictions in her claims, days I wasn't even in the office, Slack threads where our only interaction had been exchanging calendar invites. Then I played the voice memo from Paul, his quiet words from the break room, confirming what she was planning. HR said nothing for a long moment, just scribbled. Avery broke the silence. She's always had a problem with authority. I met her eyes. No, I said. I have a problem with authority used to erase people. I let it hang in the air. Then I added, this isn't a disagreement. This is a pattern. This is reputation damage. Something shifted in the room. No defenses rose. No quick dismissals. They weren't seeing drama anymore. They were seeing detail. I left the room steady, not victorious, just intact. Avery brushed past me outside the glass door. This isn't over, she muttered. I didn't flinch, just looked at her long enough for her to know there was no retreat in me anymore. That night at home, I sat down across from Cole and told him everything. No filters, no protecting anyone. He listened, quiet. Then finally said, whatever you decide next, I'll support it. I nodded, no tears. Just tired, because even when you fight the right way, it still drains you. But something was lighter now. I could breathe. The next morning, I walked into my office early. There was an envelope on my desk, unmarked, except for one word, confidential. No name, no return address. But the timing told me exactly what it was. I walked into the office that morning already bracing for fallout, emails out, whispers circling, but nothing prepared me for the scene. Screens everywhere, phones at desks, people clustering, looking down. The murmur was deafening even before I saw the subject line. Important internal recording released. The email came from all staff. Everyone clicked, everyone listened. Edith's voice, clear as if she sat next to me, Avery's words from 2 years ago. That drunken weekend, the lodge outside Dallas, reflected back at us in sharp angles. The memory stung. Avery's face changed the moment people around her glanced up. Pale, confused, caught. It wasn't just surprise, some visible shame from the higher-ups too. And me, I felt both vindicated and terrified. Something that was private, hidden, was now out in the open. No more shadows. I typed fast, fingers stiff. To Margaret, legal, HR. I laid out everything. Contracts, project drafts, timeline documents. Who worked on what and when? Pieces Avery had polished, but which originally came from me. I didn't say accused. I said erased. I hit send. My heart was pounding like a warning bell. Every second afterward felt like being judged from behind glass. Replies came. Supportive messages from people I barely knew, defensive ones from others, questions about context. Some people doubted whether they had heard the full thing. Avery didn't waste time. PR-style statements circulated in hushed channels. Misunderstandings, edited snippets, intent versus impact. Only some believed how carefully things had been curated. Others asked quietly, "Did you do this for attention?" Legal scheduled a meeting, investigative tone. I questioned myself. Did I wrong by exposing something that had been buried? Did I break trust? Could I live with the consequences? Then came the confrontations. HR called us into a room. Glass walls, bright lights. Avery with her calm, rehearsed posture. I with facts laid out like weapons. Emails where she praised my early work, notes where she asked for my input, project drafts with my name faintly stamped in metadata. I spoke up. I built more than slides. I built risk assessments. I built credibility. She tried to interrupt. Cultural expectations, family loyalty. You're tearing apart what's supposed to be a team. I listened, but didn't back down. I held up my father's pocket watch, the one he gave me when I was small. He used to say, "Time doesn't wait for silence." In that room, silence was the thing I broke. Afterward, word spread fast. Department heads came by saying things like, "I saw your memo. Looks like you had solid proof." A few reached out quietly with apologies. CEO Margaret sent an internal guideline. Misattributions should be addressed transparently in performance reviews. Avery was notably absent from meeting invitations for now. The tension was thick. I sat at my desk, flash drive hidden in my purse. It held more recordings than what I'd released. Stronger evidence. I wondered if people would believe the rest. If reputation is something you regain once it's been beaten down. Hope crept in like light under a door. I didn't feel powerful yet, but I felt less alone. That night, I got home to silence and a note waiting on the kitchen counter. Just words in Avery's handwriting. "You think you win now. Tomorrow will tell." After dinner, with Cole finishing his tea beside me and our daughter already asleep upstairs, I opened the envelope, thick paper. No return address, just my name, typed clean across the center. Inside, a letterhead I recognized, Garland Legal. I didn't breathe as I scanned the first few lines. Notice of escalation, pending arbitration review. They weren't just nudging now, they were posturing. The language was polished, but it cut like a blade. Terms like unauthorized dissemination and violation of confidentiality obligations. They were accusing me, quietly, legally, of breaching an NDA. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of silent theft, they were suddenly interested in the rules. I didn't panic. Not this time. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Because I saw the shift. This wasn't just about Avery anymore. This was about containment. I set the packet down and picked up a pen, underlining a phrase that appeared 3 times. Pattern of public disruption. That wording? I'd heard it before. I scrolled back through old emails, search filters wide. There it was, in an internal PR thread I'd once been looped into by mistake. And again, in a message from an unfamiliar board member, offering support during this sensitive time. Support? No. They were circling. Another email hit. A PR associate I never trusted, glossy resume, colder eyes, offered to schedule a resolution meeting, stating their hope that we can move forward constructively. Cole looked at me from across the table, no smile, no need for one. "They're nervous," he said, low, "and people only get nervous when something real is at stake." Morning came heavy. I hadn't slept much, but I was clear-headed. On my phone, a voicemail from Margaret Ellis, CEO. We need to speak. Alone. I met her at the tower, top floor. No assistance, no small talk. Just her behind a wide desk, sun pouring in behind her. She looked tired, but still like someone who always got her way, and maybe didn't this time. You've shown backbone, she said, sliding a file across the desk. My file, annotated, highlighted. You're not the issue, she continued, but someone wants this resolved before it becomes legacy. There it was. Not Avery, not me. Something deeper, something structural. She laid out her offer. Severance, strong recommendation, NDA, quiet exit, no scars, on record. You'd walk away clean, she said. Or you stay, and you'll see what else they're willing to use. I asked one question. What happens if I don't sign? She didn't answer, just looked at the skyline, hands folded. When I got home, the house was quiet, too quiet. I sat at the kitchen counter, opened my journal, and wrote 2 lists. One titled, What I Might Lose. The other, What She'll Learn Watching Me. I found a quote my father scribbled once years ago when his own name had been quietly omitted from a product release at his job. Integrity doesn't pay quickly, he'd written, but it always leaves you rich. I typed my response to Margaret. Declined the offer. Attached a comprehensive record of my work. Timeline, data, names, no demands, no threats, just truth, documented. And when I hit send, I said it out loud, just so I could hear it from my own mouth. I'm not for sale. That afternoon, I drove in as usual, parked in the same spot, walked to the building, swiped my badge at the entrance. Red light, swiped again, same result. I stood there, holding that badge against the scanner like maybe I'd misread it, but I hadn't. No one answered when I called security. I showed up the next morning just like always, same jacket, same walk from the parking lot, but I already knew what was coming. Swiped my badge. Nothing. The red light stared back at me like it had something to say. I didn't blink. Before I could reach for my phone, the side door clicked open. Samantha, Margaret's executive assistant, waved me over like nothing was off. Her voice stayed low, eyes steady. Margaret asked me to bring you to Conference 7, directly, privately. We walked through the floor like ghosts. No one said a word. Eyes didn't meet mine. Some flickered and looked away. Some didn't look at all. Inside the room, Avery was already pacing. Her cheeks flushed, jaw tight, muttering to herself under her breath like she was preparing for battle. Margaret walked in next, calm, composed, a folder in hand. She didn't sit. Effective today, she said without preamble. Miss Granger, your suspension from board activity is active pending full review. Avery froze, blinked, then pointed at me like a prosecutor in a bad courtroom drama. This is a smear job, she snapped. You're playing politics with my name. Margaret didn't flinch. She closed the folder slowly and set it on the table. No, Avery, this is accountability, something we should have enforced a long time ago. I said nothing. My hands were in my lap. Steady. Margaret turned to me next. You're cleared. Permanently. And privately thanked. No record of wrongdoing. No record of heroics either. Avery's face twisted. Not just angry, but betrayed. She was escorted out. Her heels clicked hard on the floor, but her silence was louder. Her eyes locked on mine on the way out. Not regret. Just fury. I didn't look away. That afternoon, I was invited to meet Margaret again. This time, off-site. A rooftop cafe 2 blocks away. Sunny, quiet, no staff hovered. Just 2 coffees. 2 seats. She got to the point. The materials you submitted closed loops we've been circling for years, she said. You didn't just speak up, you filled in the missing parts. Then like it was casual. There's a role coming up. Internal strategy, low visibility, high impact. You'd report directly to me. I stirred my coffee. Didn't drink it. Why me? I asked. She leaned in, just enough. Because you saw the rot, and didn't bend. I didn't give her an answer. I just said I'd think about it. The walk back home felt long, even though it wasn't. Something about sunlight after a storm makes everything feel too bright. I stepped into the house. Cole was in the kitchen, unpacking takeout. Our daughter had crayons everywhere, floor, table, even a streak on the wall. I told him everything. No filter. From the badge to Avery to the offer. He didn't say anything for a while, just nodded, listening all the way through. Then he asked, "Do you want it?" I looked at our daughter, looked at the kitchen, looked at him. "Not yet," I said, "but I want to know I earned it." He smiled, slow. "You didn't just earn it," he said. "You changed the whole tone of the room." Later that night, after bedtime, after dishes, after all the small noises of a lived-in home quieted, I pulled out my father's old leather-bound journal. The corners were frayed, the spine barely held. I turned to the back and added one more page. Sometimes, being the difficult woman in the room is the only kind of courage that changes anything. Then, under it, in smaller writing, "You taught me to stay steady, and today, I did." The offer letter was still on the counter. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to. For the first time in months, I went to bed without clenching my jaw. I didn't toss, didn't dream, just slept. The next morning, I put on my blazer, picked up my phone, kissed my daughter's forehead, and told Cole I'd see him at dinner. And I walked into HR, not to resign, but to lead.